So, hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're going to be going, well, back in time basically to 1984 when I was 13, coming on 14. And how old are you, Duncan?
Well,
Tiny bit younger than me?
I just always think of that as me being 14, but I'm just running on the date 1984.
So 1984.
Do you recall what month it was?
Was it maybe July?
I have no idea.
I think it was July, but...
You got the newspaper clipping? You should
yeah, absolutely. So back in July 1984, Duncan, myself, and another school friend called Martin Pook went and, after school, we went and interviewed Tom Baker for the Doctor Who fanzine that we were working on at the time.
Which was awful. The interview was awesome.
The interview was awesome. The fanzine was questionable, but hey, we were quite young at the time.
It was a good idea.
It was. So Duncan now lives in Greece, so I don't often get to see him. So I thought what would be a brilliant idea would be for us to sort of reminisce about that day. I've certainly got my memories of it and how it came about, and know that you've got your own. What we intend to do then is to just discuss what happened that day, how we came about getting to interview one of our idols, and then after we've sort of introduced it, I will play the audio of our interview with Tom Baker, and well, you can have a listen for yourselves and see what you think. I'll put some pictures behind it and that just to hopefully make it interesting. So that is going to be today's video, so sit back, relax, and let's get to it. How did the interview get set up?
All right. My mother was the general manager of a local newspaper, Plymouth Star.
Oh, the Plymouth Star.
And
I remember,
her editor, she's called Barbara, by the way, my mother.
Yes.
Her general manager was a guy called Bill Anderson, and he set it up.
Right.
So when we were backstage at the Theatre Royal, this went down at the Theatre Royal. Had we mentioned that already? Anyway, we were basically lurking. You go through the stage door and there's a corridor and a sort of a desk or whatever. And I just remember us lurking, waiting, we three children, you, me, and Martin Pook. And then the first words uttered was the man himself appearing and looking at us and saying, "Are you with Bill Anderson?"
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
So, yeah.
I remember finishing school that day and rushing home and making my way into town and meeting you. I don't know if I met you on the way or if you came to my place and then we both went in town.
I have no memory. I
can't remember how we got there.
Doing. I remember it.
Yeah.
In great detail. What else? What other things happened that day? Like going home first, or where we met?
Yeah, I seem to remember walking home, and I was really excited, and I picked up my autograph book, and I had a few BBC postcards that I wanted him to get signed as well. Did you get anything signed? Do you remember?
I'm sure I got a BBC postcard signed, which I don't have anymore. I might have sent it to you at some point.
Oh, well, I mean, I've still got mine.
I do have his autograph in his autobiography, which you've sent me.
Which is on my shelf. That was it. See, I'd met Tom. He first came to Plymouth when he was in the role, and he did a signing in Dingles in town, House of Fraser, when it used to have a bookshop inside.
Did it have a bookshop inside?
And I was only 8 at the time, and that was massive. It was full of young kids. And I remember when we had the shop, we'd still get books signed from that signing because it would be Tom Baker -77. But then the next time he came to Plymouth was when we saw him, and he was in the play She Stoops to Conquer, and through the publicity for that's how we got in to see him. And I do remember either during the interview or at the end, he signed a load of stuff, and also, because I'll be able to put this in the video, of course, at the back of my autograph book, which obviously I've still got, we said we'll send you a copy of it when it was done, and it was his agent's address at the South Bank or somewhere like that in London, the National Theatre on the South Bank, and he gave the address. So did you send him one at the end? Did you send him a copy?
A copy? I remember him asking for a copy.
Yeah.
I don't think I had the address. Did you send him?
I don't know. I had the address.
You had the address?
But I don't know whether I sent him one or we did send him one in the end.
You know, I don't recall ever thinking, oh, I was supposed to do something and I didn't do it. So going on that, maybe.
I mean, we are talking...
I really don't know. If you never got it, sir, we humbly apologise.
It is over 30 years ago now.
It's a long time.
It's like over 35 years ago now.
It's 35 years ago. It's 35
the way
years
the interview, I mean, when you hear it...
squeaky voices.
We have got squeaky teenage
squeaky
voices, but to see someone, obviously the 5 Doctors have been out, and Davison was on his last sort of season at the time.
Colin Baker was in the role.
By then, yeah.
Colin Baker was in the role by then. He the Twin Dilemma would have gone out because at some point in the interview we asked him about, would he ever appear in the show again? And
Didn't
I don't know. Colin Baker was in the role.
He said, "I'll walk through it" or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
It was almost like even back then he sort of regretted not being in such a big episode story.
Did he though?
Well, I think so.
Did he though?
Yeah. Because he comes back. He's back for the 50th, and
he's back for the 50th. Of course, he did say once upon a time in something about how giving up the role was the worst decision of his life, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but bottom line, someone like Tom Baker, in that interview, he says about liking to play leading parts.
Yeah.
And I think
he wanted
I don't know what went down in
Doctor
terms of his last season and JNT and the new production setup, whatever. But Doctor Who most of the time is the Doctor, the companions, and whoever the guest actors are that week. In the Pertwee years, you've got more of the ensemble thing that you find on other TV shows like Star Trek, because you've got people like the Brigadier and Tom Baker. I cannot see him being very happy about sharing the lead role with 4 other guys. And,
and 4 big personalities, I mean, maybe not Herndl, but, we still had Trout and Pertwee and Davison.
Oh, they did.
And it would have been Davison's Doctor,
They did a superb job with that. The story about Robert Holmes just, I think, laughing at the prospect. But, of course, Terrence Dicks made it work.
Yeah, and it's fantastic.
And you still could have had Baker's Doctor in there, of course.
Yeah.
And it would have been brilliant, but the inserts they used from Shada worked very well. But I do not believe that Tom Baker would have been too happy to be just one of the Doctors.
No, I agree.
He's the Doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I remember about the interview, which came about recently, was he mentions about Scratchman.
Yes.
Doctor Who and Scratchman, and of course that's recently finally been published after all these years.
Yes.
The other
thing that would be a very good candidate for animation.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Hint, hint. Yeah. If anyone out there in BBC land's watching this, hint.
Although
hint,
we are filming this
hint,
on the day that Fear from the Deep was announced to be animated, which is
today.
Fantastic.
Yes.
If only Victor Pemberton was alive to see it, because I bet he would have loved it.
Yes. Victor Pemberton, Fury from the Deep. Victor Pemberton, I'm just joining the dots here, because at some point in the interview, Doctor Who and the Pescatons is mentioned. Was that Victor Pemberton?
It was,
It was Victor Pemberton, that's right. And that is the one point in the interview where Martin Puck speaks. We're sort of giggling at this thing. You had played it to me once on audio tape,
right.
Pescatons.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it to do Doctor? I don't. Is that when we made a record?
Yeah.
And that's the one point where Martin Puck speaks. He goes, "It was appalling," or he just says "appalling."
Really?
Because Martin Puck was very happy to be there and he was enjoying. But that's the one thing he didn't have any questions. And our questions are, of course, 14-year-olds' questions. They're obvious. They're it's what 14-year-olds think of.
Their idols.
But of course, every single response from Tom Baker is superb and brilliant, and at no point is he talking down to you as if you're children.
He was there. He was drinking. He had a I don't know, half a cider or something. I remember he swore a couple of times, which shocked me. He said something like "greedy bastards"
Greedy
or something
bastards,
like that. Yeah, which I wasn't
Cakes
expecting.
and cockroaches. You'll hear later on.
Yeah,
greedy bastards.
But there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yes.
And of course, I mean, you were in Greece at the time, but when the biography came out, Who on Earth is Tom Baker? We had a huge window display, and he came right off the train into Plymouth and straight into the shop and signed all our stock, and we had a couple of hundred copies of it. There was a stand. I mean, basically, he signed everything. George, my business partner for Parabellum, huge Doctor Who fan, had every bit of 70s Doctor Who memorabilia imaginable, got signed by him. The TARDIS tuner, the figure, I mean, everything, all the full range of Target books. We made the most of it.
Radio, wasn't it? Sorry, TARDIS tuner.
TARDIS tuner was like a portable radio.
Yeah, because that's something like the name rings a very loud bell, and I can't quite get my head around what it looked like.
Quite rare that.
Yeah.
But
I must have seen a photo at some point.
Yeah, but I mean, so that was, several years later. I mean, he didn't remember me, and I didn't say, "Oh, do you remember I interviewed you in Plymouth back in the Theatre Royal?" I mean, I should have pulled the photo out, but at the time, we didn't know if it was even going to happen or not. And then he started touring, and we got him in the shop for the signing. But since then, I've seen him numerous times at different shows over the years. But he's always such a great character, isn't he? And I'm glad he's still involved in Doctor Who in some.
Oh yes, that cameo
way,
in Day of the Doctor.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Brilliant.
Yeah, but I mean, he's still doing Big Finish stuff.
Yes, he is.
Well, he's still working, which is great, isn't it, at that age? Yeah. So,
and of course, at some point a few years ago, didn't he read the entire dictionary for some BT telephone service?
No, I don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah. Whatever phone service it is, I think it's the BT thing where they have someone read every word in the dictionary so that you can put messages together. And I heard that people, of course, were using that man's unique voice to send messages to their friends, abusing them, swearing at them.
It is fantastic, because isn't it?
That's what you do, isn't it?
Yeah. Of course, this video was so not the video, but the audio we sent to Louis Trapani in America, didn't we? I did. Yeah. So
I remember you.
The only copy we had of the Tom Baker audio interview was when you put it into the Terminus fanzine.
Yes.
And I'd found the original cassette. Once again, before this goes out, I shall find the cassette and we'll take some photos to put into the video. No, and we sent it to
show Lewis, it on camera, then burn it. No.
We sent it to Lewis in New York, and he was able to digitize it for us, and it was used on episode 200, I think it was, of Doctor Who Podshock, which is a Doctor Who. It was a Doctor Who podcast.
Is it not going?
I don't think anymore. No, Lewis is very big. He works for Apple now, and James Norton got married and started a family and stuff. And Ken Deep travels the world, from what I can see, because he's on Facebook. He's always travelling somewhere. So I don't think they do the show anymore, which is a shame. But obviously, there's many Doctor Who podcasts around, but that was the first.
Yes, that was the first one.
Long time. Yeah,
that was the first one.
Started in about 2005, I think, maybe even earlier than that, just before the new series kicked off. But yeah, so Lewis used his skill, and he got the audio copy as good as it possibly could be, considering it was just on an old cassette deck.
It's a very entertaining interview. Like I say, it's 14-year-olds with squeaky voices asking the sort of lame things that 14-year-olds do, but his responses are always brilliant. And again, I said it earlier, he's at no point is he talking down to us.
No,
some point towards the... Yes, okay, so it's me, Julian, Martin Pook, who says that the Pescatons was appalling, and Bill Anderson is chiming in, and at the end, towards the end of the interview, Bill Anderson asks Tom Baker some questions to do with She Stoops to Conquer, because that was current, current local newspaper, newsworthy stuff. And then we're joined briefly at the end, just before it cuts off, by a lady who worked at the Theatre Royal, who I think she was called Kaz. It's Kaz or K or something. But yes.
Yeah, I remember that. I do remember now. So we met him, I believe, on the Friday, okay? And because he says...
remember the day.
Bill, and the reason I can work it out, because Bill says, and how's the play going? And Tom Baker said, well, everything bar tomorrow is sold out, the matinee. And that was when the local Doctor Who group, we all went along to see it Saturday afternoon.
You saw the play?
I actually saw it, yeah. So that was the very next day, and there was lots of empty seats, so we were like 2 or 3 rows back from in the stalls, and we all met him again afterwards as well.
Brilliant.
And I always remember Steve Green, who's still around today. He had a big pile of Doctor Who postcards and a gold pen, and he got Tom to start signing, and this pen leaked everywhere. It was all over his hands and everything.
Wonderful.
And the play was...
I think your pen has malfunctioned.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that I always remember that as well, and that was fantastic. So, well, that was the day we met Tom Baker. Yes. So Duncan, really nice to have you on. Where can our viewers,
lovely being here.
Where can our viewers find you? Because you are no stranger to acting and voice work and other many things.
Well, I'm out there. I'm on Facebook. We've got, me and my friends, our zero-budget sketch comedy project, Bunny Poo Salad, and those episodes have been up there for years, and we're making Bunny Poo Salad the movie, and we'll see where that goes. But yes, I'm just out there on social media as people are, and my show reels on YouTube. And
well, without further ado, then let us roll the Tom Baker interview from back in 1984.
Enjoy the interview.
I do hope you enjoy it. Yeah,
it's absolutely marvellous.
It was really good that day. What a great memory, in fact. Excellent.
Jules Burt on our show. Jules Burt, you may remember, who was in Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. He's been a friend of Doctor Who Podshock, and I'd like to welcome Jules Burt back to Doctor Who Podshock. Hi, welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
It's fabulous having you back on the show. We had you on, it seems just like a few months ago, but it was actually last summer, I believe last August, you were here on your honeymoon in New York, and we had a chance to sit down literally face to face with you and have a good time over a couple of hours and record a bit for our show. So how you been?
Oh, it's been really good. Yes, work is good. I can't believe it was. It seems almost a year since I was last over to see you and Ken at the Doctor Who New York meetup, which was brilliant, and that's what got me to dig out this old cassette.
And I'm glad you did. This dates back to, I believe, 1984, an interview that you with your friend Duncan Skinner and Martin. Was it Pook?
Pook, yes, that's right. Yeah.
I wasn't sure. So that's fantastic that you guys had this opportunity to sit down literally with Tom Baker and interview him, because it's not often that he does these interviews.
No, we were very lucky. Duncan's mother at the time was an advertising editor for the local paper, and through her contacts there, Tom was only down for a week in the theatre, which was quite new then, the Plymouth Theatre Royal, and managed to wing it so that, he met up with basically some fans, and we got to ask him a few questions, which was an absolute treat. Tom had been to Plymouth a couple of times, once in 1977, I think he did it again in 1980, doing formal signing sessions in Debenhams, which is a big department store. First time he was even down in costume.
Really?
Yeah. The second time I got to meet him, and that was absolutely fantastic, but it was he was just signing Target paperbacks, and I don't even think Doctor Who Weekly had started back then. But this, to get the chance to meet him, when as I said, I was only 15 at the time, Duncan was there, and we'd started a Doctor Who fanzine called Terminus, which we sold through the Celestial Toy Room Dwas publication. Tape scenes were all the rage back then. Looking back on it now, I mean, I only heard it for the first time in 20 years or so this afternoon when you emailed the copy over to me of the interview. To be honest, it could have been a lot worse. A slightly squeaky voice. And the questions, I think Duncan's were more the traditional, what's your favourite story? And I'm pretty pleased with some of the questions that I asked him towards the end. Because, would he come back? Because Colin Baker was doing that story with Patrick Trout. And
really, a few of them you caught him off guard. There was one were there any, I don't know, negative moments in the show, something along that effect, and there's a long pause, and he goes, you guys have been influenced by the chat shows, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, when I read his biography years later, I think at that time he was... he had just divorced, and I think he was perhaps heading towards perhaps a few rough years. He really was not very happy with the show. I think he just wanted to forget it, but I think he was beginning to realise that it was going to follow him around for an awful long time. It certainly wouldn't be like today, where he's doing commentaries.
Sure. Yeah. Well, this was 1984. He had just left the role a few years later. The year before was the Five Doctors, which he didn't appear in. So
famous.
Yeah. So you got to put yourself in that mindset. In fact, as you know, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary now. So this goes back to even a year before the Gallifreyan Embassy. So you even scooped us we got to meet Tom Baker in 1986, and even then he didn't grant us an interview. So hats off to the three of you. I think that's incredible. And you also had this was written up in one of the papers as well. I have a clipping that you had placed up.
That's right. Yeah, that was the paper that Duncan's mum worked for. So they gave us a little piece, which was once again, it was great, and I think it got mentioned at school the next week when it had gone out. And as I said, the DWAS covered it, and I think we sold at least 150 copies, something like that. Whether any of them are still surviving, I don't know.
And this was for Terminus, which was a audio show.
Audio fans.
It was basically what we know as a podcast today, but before podcasting, it was, instead of being distributed through RSS feeds that podcasts are, you did it on a cassette, analog, and was distributed that way.
That's right. I mean, we used to just duplicate. We'd make a master and then just hand duplicate them all. And the one that you've got there, even the labels were,
yes,
hand stuck on.
I can see they're coming off a bit there. I was very careful and delicate with it.
I mean, that was such a golden age back then for Doctor Who fanzines, and a lot of the names you know today. I mean, Paul Cornell did a great one. Mm-hmm. Gary Russell, I think, did Sharda. Plus the official DWAS one, I think, was called TARDIS, and a lot of those great writers, cut their teeth there. There was some brilliant stuff in those. Ours wasn't quite up to that level, but we had a lot of fun putting it together. And,
as an audio podcaster, I have to, compliment you and Duncan for doing the show, especially at that time, just working with analog equipment. You guys did a great show, and it's on par with podcasts that you hear today.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so. It was certainly a lot of fun when we put it together, for sure.
All right, well, we're gonna bring you back to 1984 with this rare classic interview with Tom Baker, and I'm so thrilled to have Jules here with us for just to introduce you to this interview. It's a real rare treat, and as Jules said, he had sent it to us actually a few months ago. We've been just so busy as of late with the new series and everything that's going on with Doctor Who Podshock that this is our first chance to bring it to you. So what better than episode 200 of Doctor Who Podshock? So thank you once again, Jules. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And on behalf of James and Ken, they also send their regards as well.
Thank you, guys. Excellent.
All right. Well, here's Tom Baker, Jules, Duncan, and Marty, right? Or Martin.
Martin, that's it.
Yes.
How did you get started in acting, and how did you get the part of the Doctor?
I got started in acting thanks to the Germans bombing Liverpool during the war, which kept me away from school. And because of being away from school, we were encouraged to entertain ourselves and entertain each other and other people. And that's how I got started as an actor, as a boy when I was very small. Because often, one couldn't go to school for weeks or months on end. So that's how I got started doing that. And as for Doctor Who, that was just another accident. I was out of work and the job was empty, and I had written an indignant letter not to ask to do that. And the letter went to a fella who'd just come away from a casting session. And at that time, there was a picture out that I'd done, I think, called The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, which was a special effects picture directed by Ray Harryhausen. And this fellow, having been to a casting session with no idea that he was the head of the department, went to see this film and then proposed me. And then the rest of the department went to see the film.
From there on.
And I was in. That was it. It was all done in one letter. I mean, by the time they went to see the film and rang me back, they decided that if I really wanted to do that job, that they would give it to me. That's how it happened.
Did you enjoy working with the rest of the Doctor Who crew?
With the crew?
Yeah, the producers.
Yeah, as long as they agreed with me. I adored working with them, yeah. I adore people who agree with me, don't you? I can't stand people who disagree with me. If they did what I wanted them to do, I adored them. And if they forced me to do what they wanted to do, I hated them. bit like family life, really. So sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad.
Agreeable or disagreeable. Did you have a favourite companion?
Well, you obviously, that's a journalist question, if ever there was one. So whichever way I answer that, I'm going to offend 4 girls, aren't I? I did have a favourite companion.
I didn't put them in that one, Tom. No?
I did have a favourite companion. I married her.
Okay. Who designed your costume?
It was designed by an amazing young man called Jim Atchison, who then went on to do films. And that came just by accident again. We just went out to play, and we used to go to wardrobes and try on clothes before he drew any pictures. And it was in the ordinary way. A designer has an idea, and they draw pictures, and then they make up the clothes. But we had enough time to go out together to get to know each other. And we used to go out and get dressed up in all sorts of costume departments, the BBC or Morris Angel or places like that. And gradually a sort of figure began to emerge. And then we decided to have a scarf. And Jim had seen a man in a pub with a scarf of those colours, the original colours, just an ordinary woolen scarf. And he wrote down that colour scheme, and we bought some wool and gave it to a woman called Begonia Pope, who had never worked for the BBC before, but she was famous as a knitter, and we knew nothing about knitting either. And when we went to pick up the scarf, we bought too much wool, and she knitted it all up. And the scarf went right across the room. And that's how it happened. It was all an accident.
Do you still have your costume?
Well, why should I have my costume?
Well, Louise Jameson kept hers. I presume.
But Louise Jameson never did have any taste, did she? I thought her costumes were terrible. No, I haven't got my costume. I mean, it's like asking me if I got my own army costume.
Do you have a favourite story?
I don't think so, no. You must understand that I used to work on 4 or 6 scripts at a time. And a great deal of the time I didn't know what was going on, which I think was an advantage when you consider the subject of the scripts. In America, they think that I was very spontaneous as Doctor Who, and indeed I think I was very spontaneous simply because I didn't know what was going on. I was constantly surprised. I didn't much want to know what was going on. I just went from scene to scene, trying to make it compelling and amusing. So I didn't really have a favourite story. I had 1 or 2 favourite monsters. Like, I remember Slippery. I used to like Slimy Monster, or Rats. But all those mechanical ones I thought were boring, except the first one, which I thought was amazing, which was the giant robot. That was absolutely amazing. But all the others I found not all that compelling, really.
Can you remember any really bad mistakes that were made during filming?
You chaps are completely corrupted by watching chat shows, aren't you? This is the high point. It's maybe almost embarrassing, don't you?
I'm leaving it to them.
Just I'm
listening.
No, I can't quite elaborate away. No, there must be thousands of them. But I don't think mostly they were rather irritating because one doesn't want things to go wrong. Even on film, it's not like working in the theatre where you rehearse everything and then it happens. Usually it happens because you're on an open stage with other actors and it's very well rehearsed. In film, you need about 10 factors to come together. So you may do the scene brilliantly, and they say, let's go again, because it was a booming shot. Boom operators never apologize. So the next time, actually, the focus puller didn't get it right, so you do it again. So each time they think the actors should get it right, and the actors do mostly get it right. And then when all the technicians have got it right on the 15th take, the actor is then so overwrought he forgets a line or a move, and they say things like, can't you get it right, darling? And then tempers really flare up, and then it gets very interesting indeed. Go on.
Were there any stories that you disliked?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I didn't feel that strongly about it, no. Sometimes there were incidents and stories that I didn't like, certain violent incidents. But no, I think I settled it. I was just hired to do acting, I didn't have any editorial influence on it.
What happens to the film that you're making, Doctor Who and the Sandman?
Doctor Who and Scratchman.
Scratchman?
I noticed that with Ian Martin and James Hill, yes, nothing happened to it. That's what happens to most scripts, nothing.
Were you a Doctor Who fan when the programme first began?
No, I wasn't even a Doctor Who fan after I started doing it. The pub was always open when it was on, so I never actually saw it myself. I had other things to do on a Saturday, but I did enjoy doing it.
Do you watch the programme these days?
No, as I didn't watch it when I was in it. I'm extremely unlikely to watch it while anyone else is doing it.
Would you appear in the next anniversary special?
When will that be?
So if there is another decade or something.
Well, as far as I'm alive, if I'm alive and I've got nothing to do, I don't mind walking through it for a minute.
Why do you think that Doctor Who has been running for so long?
Because it's a good formula. You must know that answer. Why anything runs a long time is just a good formula. And when a good formula takes place, you get on. Why does This Is Your Life run on? Why did Z-Cars go on? Why did Crossroads go on? Yeah. Because in their way, they're all good formulas. It doesn't matter who's in it.
Do you have any tips for anybody who is interested in becoming an actor?
Not at all. I would have thought that anyone who's silly enough to want to become an actor wouldn't take tips anyway, because when you do something like want to become an actor, you're not really being rational. Right? It's such a stupid thing to want to be. Because the chances of any kind of success at all are so utterly remote. I think the unemployment rate among actors is 86%. So the miners or the steel workers or the carpenters have got nothing on actors. 86% are out of work. So your chances of earning a living as an actor are nearly zero, even if you're very good. Maybe especially if you're very good. Because the factors that go into being successful have often got very little to do with whether you're good or not. So I'd say, if they insisted, I'd say nothing. But if anyone insisted on saying something, I'd say, well, I'd just say that, you're mad. And if you're mad, you don't need tips. Mad people, you can't advise mad people, can you?
Sure. Jules, a question.
Do you still get a lot of attention from Doctor Who fans?
Yes, I do, yes. I was in America a lot last year, where I'm considered some kind of miracle worker, such as the potency of television. So there's an enormous amount of time there, yes.
What do you think of American Doctor Who convention?
Well, I've got nothing to measure them against, really. They're just astonishing. They're so large, exciting, amazing, and silly all at the same time. But it's just amazing, yeah. Americans take fandom, fandom, I think they call it, very serious.
Do you think you played the Doctor too long?
I think I probably do everything for too long, yes. But I mean, I used to laugh when I used to go to work, so I thought, I didn't see why I didn't give it up. I was enjoying it, but I think probably I did stay a bit too long, really. I think I stayed probably a year or so too long. I did at one time resign, and they persuaded me to renew the contract. But, it's all right. I mean, I enjoyed it.
If you had the chance to return to the role along with Colin Baker in a current Doctor Who story, would you accept if the time was convenient?
No, I don't think so, no.
Well, at the moment, the next season they're having Colin Baker and Patrick Troughton.
Well, that's fine. But, I can't speak for any of that. You're asking me. My answer is no. I don't want anything to do with it, no. I did it and was very close to it as the leading man in it. And I didn't want to go back playing a feed to Colin Baker or Patrick Troughton or indeed anyone else. I like playing leading parts.
Which control console did you prefer? The usual one or the wooden one?
I hated both of them. I thought they were both absolutely mad. But I couldn't say that when I was doing it, but I hated them, yeah. I hated them all, yeah. I hated the whole treatment of the inside of the TARDIS. I thought it wasn't nearly daring and adventurous enough. But of course I couldn't say that because I was on contract.
Do you think The Gothers was a good story for you to regenerate to it was?
Well, it was alright, I think. It was okay. Do you think it was a good one?
That's brilliant.
Oh, well. Yes,
Yeah, the answer.
that's alright, yeah.
Do you think you should have had more stories with Unity?
No, I don't think so. I was very bored with Unit, and maybe I influenced actually the annihilation of Unit. I thought all those realistic soldiers running around firing guns were very tedious, and indeed I often complained bitterly that the resolution of stories in Doctor Who used to exhaust, since they were nearly always resolved in an explosion. I find that incredibly tedious. That's how you resolve things in this world. If you're thinking of this man from this person from another galaxy traveling the entire galaxy, it seemed to me that there wasn't enough difference between the Earth and those other planets we were on. They were always blowing things up. It wasn't strange enough. I mean, I'd much rather have been much funnier, I think, to have turned the villains into, say, cockroaches, don't you? To actually have made a cake, and these greedy bastards all swallowed the cake, cream cake, something like that, and they were all turned into cockroaches. That strikes me as being really neat, that, instead of blowing them up. And then what happens is they're all scuttling across the street, and you can hear them with the wonderful equipment we've got. And as they're scuttling across some kind of street, some terrible casual people come walking down the street. And then I think that will be fun. The children would like that.
I'm sure they would, Tom.
Right, well, another question. Whose idea was it to do Doctor Who and the pesticides? Do you think it was too childish?
I can't remember now whose idea it was. Was that what we made a record on?
Yes.
But we never did that on the television.
No, it was on the record.
Oh yes, it was just made for record. I don't know whose idea it was. People always ask me to do things like that. I've forgotten who wrote it now. But Elizabeth was it, wasn't she? And I so liked working with Elizabeth, because she was the first one I knew there. I never saw Elizabeth, you know. I don't think I saw her once outside of work. Oh yes, I did last year in America, in Chicago. Last December I saw her. But I thought she was a wonderful Sarah Jane. Absolutely wonderful. I really liked working with her. But then because she was the first one, you know, I was very biased, and she was very kind to me. And when people are kind to me, my judgment goes a bit awry, actually. If people are very kind to me, I get a bit imbalanced.
Like this lot, Tom, isn't it?
Right. Any more questions?
Well, that's all.
That's it.
Okay.
Are you happy there?
Thank you.
I'm not going to put hard questions to you, Tom. Just tell me, how does it go in the school?
How's the play going? Well, I think with the exception of tomorrow afternoon, we'll have set out.
Yeah, I have this. It's quite good news.
Yes, they've been standing in the evening.
Do you reckon international people could do a lot more down here? Do you think the response is going to go about somewhere about the country?
Well, the National Theatre, I think, keeps to its brief. It came down there last year with a stupendous production of Arrivals, didn't it?
Right.
And a bit earlier than that, not even a year before that, it came down with Don Quixote, with Paul Schofield.
I noticed you say Don Quixote.
Well, I mean, I could have said...
Yeah, what would be some of the...
Don Quixote.
That's right.
So I think that Plymouth, this big theatre, because this theatre is as big as the Olivia, so I think Plymouth has had a fair crack at the National the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So I was here for Shakespeare, wasn't I? An educated reader. So I think they're doing pretty well now. But I mean, they also have the drum theatre, which is smaller scale.
Smaller scale, but...
That interview was recorded at the Theatre Royal Plymouth when Tom Baker was appearing in Oliver Goldsmith's play She Stoops to Conquer. And we'd like to say thank you very much to Tom Baker for giving up their time.
And thank you, Jules, Duncan, and Martin for sharing this rare interview with us with Tom Baker. Some apologies for the quality of the interview there. Please realize that the tape was an analog tape from 26 years ago, and it was recorded in a cafeteria there at the theater, and there was a lot of background noise, and they were by a window there, so there was street traffic as well, so we cleaned it up as much as possible. So it's not what you normally expect with today's interviews, but please understand those factors involved. It's fantastic hearing what Tom Baker had to say, especially when you put yourself in that mindset of 1984, which it was just a few years after he left the role, and Colin Baker was the current Doctor. Actually, with Colin Baker being the current Doctor, that would have to be, 1985, actually, when that interview probably was done. Well, 85, 84, it's at least 25 years old. Interesting, to say the least.